Hello sweet friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel and this is Rock City Cookies. Last week I participated in my very first cookier collaboration. If you aren't familiar with what a collab is, it is when cookiers all over the world create a cookie design that is centered around a particular theme. And then all of the participants post their contributions on a specific day. It can also be sometimes a month-long collaboration, sometimes it's a couple weeks long. So whatever the designated time is, the participants post their contribution during that time frame and they all use the same hashtag. The collaboration I participated in was called the Stroke of Genius collaboration. The hostesses of this collaboration were Blair and Maya. And I'll be sure to also link their Instagram handles down below because trust me, these are two ladies that you are going to want to follow. I also highly encourage you to head over to Instagram and type in the hashtag Stroke of Genius collab to go see some of the amazing work that was posted. And seriously, my mind is still blown at the level of talent in those that participated. So today I thought I would show you what I contributed to the Stroke of Genius collaboration, as well as teach you how to do it for yourself. To begin, you will need a paintbrush cookie cutter. If you want to use the same one that I used, I'll be sure to link it down in the description box below. And as always, hand cutting is definitely an option. So you can literally go and get your paintbrushes, trace around them onto a piece of paper, cut it out, use that as your template, or you can go to Google, find some paintbrush clip art, scale it to the size that you need it, print it out, and use that as your template. All right, let's get started. I do want to take a second to mention the fact that this particular paintbrush design has several different sections that need to dry individually, so just be sure to account for that in your timing when you're making this design. I chose to start by doing the wooden handle. Now, we will be adding more details to make this look like real wood later, but for now, be sure to start with brown icing. With a thicker piping consistency, outline the handle. Then, with a flooding consistency that's not too thin so that it doesn't run off, flood the handle. Pop any air bubbles and then let the handle dry long enough that you can move it without any cracking so that you can do the next section. Okay, now that our handle is done, let's move on to the metal portion of our cookie. Again, we will be adding details to this portion of the cookie later to make it look more like metal, but for now, you are going to want your base icing color to be gray to make it easier later on. We will be splitting up the metal section into 3 different parts. Details matter in the cookie world, so taking the extra time to flood each one of these sections individually really adds to the realism of this cookie, and it really does make a big difference in your final outcome. Outline a small area next to the handle with a thick consistency. In small sections like this, you will see me use a squiggly line, and that squiggly line of thick icing just helps my icing to not crater as well as to keep a nice little puff. Once this area has dried for a little while, using a fan or a dehydrator will help speed up this process. It's time to move on to the next section. This area of metal will be your largest section, so make sure you outline a bigger area than your last. Also, do a squiggly line again. This just helps your flood out as well as keeps a consistent puff all the way throughout. After that section has dried, it's time to do the last section of the metal, and this is again a smaller section, so follow the same technique as before. Outline, squiggly line, flood. Once all areas are completed and dried, it's time to add the details on top of the metal to make this area look a little bit more realistic. There is no right or wrong here. Do whatever design your heart desires. I chose to add a few parallel lines to the top, outline the middle section, and then just added a few more lines to the bottom. We will come back and finish this section later, but it is important that you do this piping work a little bit earlier on in the process, simply because this needs to dry completely before we can make our metal look metal. Okay, you ready for some hand cramping? Because this set is a hand killer. With a thick consistency, pipe straight lines onto your paintbrush for your bristles. There's no rhyme or reason to the madness here. I just preferred to do straight lines all the way down my brush, leaving a little bit of a gap in between. Then I went back a second time, filled in that gap. Then I went back a third time just to add more layering to the bristles, as well as fill in any areas where I felt like I may still see the cookie a little bit. The only trick here is just to make sure that you're layering your bristles in whatever process you choose, as well as making sure your icing is nice and thick and does not blend together at all. The hard work is done. Now is the fun part. Let's make this paintbrush come alive. To start, let's make this wooden handle look more like wood. Now, there are a lot of ways to do this, but I personally chose to use paint. Combine dark brown gel food coloring with a high proof alcohol. I personally prefer to use pure grain alcohol. With a fan brush, drag your brown food gel coloring mixture down the handle of the brush. Do this over and over again until the entire handle is covered with brown markings. While you have your brown paint mixture out, let's go ahead and use that same brown to add some dimension to the bristles on our paintbrush. Using a smaller brush, paint all of the bristles. Now, I know this seems like a step that you think you probably can skip. However, I highly recommend that you don't, because it really does make a huge difference in the final outcome. Now that the wooden handle is done, as well as the bristles, let's do something about this gray middle. To make this look more like metal, you will need to have a silver luster dust. You will mix that luster dust with a high grain alcohol and paint the mixture directly onto your cookie. I use Truly Mad Plastics Silver Luster Dust, and I'll be sure to link that in the description box below. However, I do want to say that the silver is actually a little bit clunky. It's not my favorite, but I have yet to find anything else on the market that I prefer. I just think silver is a different monkey than all the golds that are out there. I also combined a black luster dust with this silver just to get a darker silver color. However, this step is totally optional and just regular silver will work just fine. I then took the mixture of the luster dust and the high grain alcohol, and I painted that mixture all over the gray area of my cookie to make it look like metal. If you are just making paintbrushes, then that's it. You are done. And this technique will work with any paintbrush of any size. But since this was for a collaboration, I decided I wanted to use my new brand colors and have a poured paint look for this set. In small bowls, I made a flood consistency of my desired colors for this set, and then I poured that onto the end of the paintbrush cookies. Before I poured the icing onto the cookie, I actually placed the cookie onto a piece of acetate, and under the acetate, I put a small piece of cardboard. Now, the cardboard was simply there just to make sure that I could safely transport my cookie from the table that I was working on onto the drying rack. It in no way touched the cookie at all. Now, the purpose of the acetate is just to give the icing a place to dry completely. Once the icing has dried 100%, the acetate pops right off of the icing, and then you can move your cookie around to wherever you desire. And that's it, a paintbrush cookie. Don't forget to go check out the hashtag Stroke of Genius collab on Instagram. You will not be disappointed. If you liked this video, go and check out the next one here. Be sure to like and subscribe down below. And until next time, my sweet friends, bye-bye. It's not a good sign if I mess up on the very first word. It's gonna be a long day. How do I hold this word and not look weird? Oops, not like that. I can hear my children fighting. Okay, trying this again. Parallel line, parallel line, parallel line, parallel line. That is such a hard thing to say, obviously. Y'all, I just scratched my face and now I have a red mark and we're just gonna have to roll with it. See it? Moving on.